happened to me when I was a young child. As a paranormal researcher who has been involved in the investigation of several occurrences for over 60 years, I've had several strange happenings to myself and friends, even as a very young child. These are some of my memories. My first story happened when I was about 7 or 8 years old. In 1958, my family moved to a small town named Bernardston. It was in the western part of Massachusetts and a long way from the home that I once known and loved in Framingham, Mass. It was a strange kid, had bad teeth, and a tough time making friends. But there in that small town, I would meet a friend who would remain my friend to this day. I hear from her at least once a week, and we ghost hunt together to this day. This is our story, and one of the reasons why we became involved in the paranormal. My family lived in a small side street, not far from what you would call the main road of town. There wasn't much to do in the neighborhood other than play baseball, and I couldn't play very well. So Sandy and I would go on long walks. My parents didn't like us to go past our street, but they had finally given me permission to cross the main road, so Sandy and I decided to try it. There was a huge field directly across the street. We spent most of the afternoon just enjoying the flowers and generally playing like any other 7-year-old kids. One of the rules of my home was that when the street lights came on, you head home. We didn't have a curfew, but you knew that if you didn't come home, you'd be in a lot of trouble. So I looked up and noticed that the lights were coming on, and Sandy and I decided to start to get up and head toward my house. But just as we stood up, we saw a strange light in the distance. There was no sound, but the lights were moving very quickly, much faster than any airplane we had ever seen. It seemed to hover over us for a while, just directly above us. We watched in amazement as the light seemed to stay in one place, then without warning, take off very quickly across the sky. Once the light, or whatever it was, had left, I looked up to find out that I was holding my friend's hand in sheer terror. We walked slowly home and tried to tell my parents, but neither one of them believed us and laughed. To this day, none of us talk about it very much, but when we do talk about it, we don't laugh. The next story takes place about 8 years later, just about the time I entered junior high school. At the time, there was a really popular show called Dark Shadows. It was really a soap opera. It was very popular among everybody in our neighborhood. Every day, the streets would empty, and everyone would run home to turn on the television at 4 o'clock. It was full of everything paranormal, including ghosts, seances, you name it, they did it. But it starred a vampire named Barnabas Collins, and everyone that I knew was madly in love with him. One of the things that happened was the Collins family had a seance resulting in a girl named Vicky going back in time. Naturally, my friends and I decided to try to hold a seance ourselves. We held a few, and most of them had no incidents. One time we had a large one in our friend's backyard, and her father had come up and yelled. It had scared all of us to death, but nothing had happened. After that, we just kept our seances more or less a secret. It was a hot summer day when we once more decided to hold another seance. Just a couple of years before, in the house that we're now sitting, my friend's grandfather had died. He had been sick for a while, and he had lost one of his legs to diabetes. So we all set to call back the grandfather. We once more took a seat around a circle and began to call back Grandfather Black. We've been doing this for about 10 minutes and finally gave up. We were bumming when one of us remembered that we were calling back the wrong grandfather. We all laughed and sat down to have another circle and tried to do it all over again. We had just begun when we heard a car come into the driveway. We listened as the car door slammed and a knock came to the door. Downstairs we heard my friend's mother welcoming in none other than Grandfather Black. By this time we're all scared and listening intently. That is when, to our dismay, we heard him tell her that he had a strange urge to come here, like someone was calling to him. Well, that was enough. We ran down the stairs, flew by him and their mother. When he said, "Hi, kids," we all screamed and ran even faster. I don't think we ever told him why we were so frightened that day, but we never tried that again. My third story involves a friend of mine who lived in the town of Greenfield. Now, Greenfield was about 7 miles away from my home, and her mother and my mother worked together. So we got to see each other quite often. My friend Karen was into the same thing that I was and was very interested in doing seances. She was a fan of dark shadows, and we decided to hold another seance. Now, we had had several before, and nothing had happened. This evening, we had no reason to believe anything was going to happen and anything different was going to go on. Her room was very small, and we sat on the floor, and we started to call out for Babe Ruth, of all people. We didn't even know what his real name was. We weren't big baseball fans, so he kept on saying Babe Ruth. We've been sitting there about 10 minutes calling his name when there was a change in the atmosphere. The room felt different, the air, and it felt like it was a little chilly. All of a sudden I looked up and there was a large shadow of a man appearing on the wall behind my friend. I must have looked very scared because my friend turned around to see the same thing. We ran out screaming out of the room and down the stairs. Our mothers were at the kitchen table and had no ears for our story. Why, you two should stay away from holding seances. I've heard that spirits can fix themselves to you and follow you. Stop playing with them, they had yelled at us. We went back upstairs to her room and opened the door very gingerly. Much to our happiness, we were no longer saw the shadow on the wall, and everything seemed to be all right. That night, when I went home, I was haunted by nightmares of all about that man Babe Ruth. I woke up and felt as though I was being watched. I quickly turned on the light, but saw nothing. For the next several days, I felt as though I was being watched, and I am an absolute next nervous wreck. But then, on Thursday morning, when I came down into the family room, I saw the same shadow. I was sure it was the same shadow that I had seen that night. Now I was really scared and didn't know what to do. After school, I called my friend and asked her if she had had anything happen to her. And she said yes, she felt as though someone was following her and that her room was really cold. That Saturday, I convinced my mom to invite Karen over to my house. We went to the big tree on the side of the house, and there we called back Babe Ruth. We promised to be good, that we would never call him back again. That shadow appeared there once more, and fortunately for the both of us, has never come back.